Need help marketing your startup? Well, then you should check out omnipublic.global. That's what they specialize in, is marketing for startups. And we want to thank them today for being our sponsor of the Grit Daily Like a Boss podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Grit Daily Like a Boss podcast. And you've got me, your host, Loralyn Mears. And today I've got Katherine Jin. Now, you're probably thinking, well, in this era of COVID, everybody has sparkling clean counters. Disinfectant is just, well, it's probably oozing out of your pores by this point. But you'd be surprised. There's a lot of room for improvement. So we're going to talk to the co-founder here of Kinnos. Hi, Katherine.
Hi, Loralyn. Thank you so much for having me. I'm one of the co-founders and I'm the current CTO of Kinnos.
Fantastic. So we wanted to get that clear. So tell us about Kinnos.
So Kinnos is an infection prevention company located in Brooklyn, New York. Our main product is called Highlight. It's an additive combined with bleach disinfectant products to address the major problems with disinfection right now. So I would say the average person, you've used a Lysol wipe before. If you actually read the back of that Lysol wipe, it'll tell you to disinfect a surface, you need to have that Lysol wipe sit wet on a surface for 5 minutes. Now, I know I've never done that, and I would posit that the vast majority of Americans don't do that either. And while that's okay for our surfaces at home, these same problems are happening in our healthcare, in our healthcare settings, and in our hospitals. For example, if you are cleaning a hospital room down with with a bleach wipe, and a C. diff spore is left in just one tiny spot of the room, that can lead to a major infection, which can lead to lost productivity, often actually being. Sorry, let me re-say that last part. Small break. So right now, if you're in a hospital setting and you're trying to clean a room down with bleach, let's say you wipe down the entire room. However, if you don't wait the right amount of contact time, and if you haven't ensured you've covered every single spot, one C. diff spore is enough to lead to a deadly infection. And so with our product, we are trying to intuitively improve disinfection with a disinfectant that can show you what you're wiping as you wipe it. So it colorizes surface blue, so you can see exactly where you've colored. And then the color will fade completely from blue to clear to indicate to you when your surfaces are clean. So not only is it a great training tool, but it's also just a great improvement to current disinfectants by making sure you hit those two key things of coverage and contact time.
Now, there's a whole bunch of things in there, Katherine, that I want to break it down for our audience in a couple at a time. So one of them, you mentioned the word C. diff. Now, I'm not sure if everybody in our audience understands that that is in reference to Clostridium difficile, which is one of the most notorious, horrible bacterial infections that typically spread rampantly through the hospital, spread through feces, and it's kind of a bugger to get rid of.
Yes, C. diff is surprisingly extremely difficult to kill. That's why you can only use bleach wipes to kill it. However, if you just have one spore left on a surface, that's a bacteria that can lead to severe diarrhea, colitis, and again, even death. And, in hospital settings where you have patients go into, these rooms expecting a certain standard of care, expecting to get better, it's shocking and really says a lot about the current disinfection process that about 1 in 6 patients get C. diff when they check into a hospital. So imagine you're going to a hospital, feel better, but you leave with a possibly life-threatening infection.
And I know people in my family, my aunt actually, who has almost succumbed to C. diff. It took her a long time to recover from it. And, she's an octogenarian. So it was not easy. It's a terrible thing. I'd also like to come back to something that's really important about what you're doing at Kinnos and how you had the inspiration behind it, because you were working with, now we think C. diff is bad, but you worked with, I'm going to go ahead and say it, the E word, Ebola.
Yeah. It's a totally different world now than back in 2014 when the Ebola crisis first hit. Now the whole world has had this experience of living through the COVID pandemic. But back in 2014, the most terrifying pathogen on everyone's minds was Ebola, West Africa was undergoing its crisis during 2014. That's when I was a junior in college. And my college did this really amazing thing where they brought in actual healthcare workers from the field in West Africa to our school to explain some of the problems that they were facing on the ground. And one of the healthcare workers told us after they're done treating the patients, they spray down their entire suits. They wear these big yellow waterproof suits called PPE suits down with a bleach solution. However, you can't see where it's going, and healthcare workers were getting infected at extremely high rates. So that's where we got the idea. As 3 students, we came up with the initial concept in one of our co-founders' fraternity houses. We went through, the hackathon route where we did a couple demos. We tried as much as we can to test out the product. And, we ended up getting some really great traction. The New Yorker did a feature on us. And from there, that's kind of where the ball really got rolling. The fire department of New York saw that feature. They reached out to us. They had us do a couple of hazmat trainings with their ambulance units. And then they told us that they wanted to buy it. And so our origin story is always fun to tell because it's so surprising. It's not what we had originally set out to do. We just saw a problem. We wanted to fix it. We were still students at the time, so we didn't really believe that we could actually do anything to help. So as the ball got moving and we saw that people were interested in using this product, it made us really excited as 3 students who are all really passionate about healthcare, who are all really passionate about biology, but didn't necessarily know how to make an impact. And so ever since then, I've been working on Kinnos, and the product has grown a lot from not only being an additive to improve disinfection in low resource settings during epidemics, but to really be added to any existing bleach disinfectant during any kind of use case in a healthcare scenario.
And commercial as well as like private residential, right? It applies to both. There's no need that it's only restricted to the use in a hospital.
Yes, bleach is most commonly used in hospitals right now, but I totally agree with you. There's no restriction as to where you can use Highlight as long as you're using bleach disinfectants. And in the future, we are hoping to launch our Highlight for quat wipes by the end of this year. And next year, we want to launch Highlight for hydrogen peroxide. So the goal is really to have a whole suite of color additive technology for every single disinfectant, so that disinfection across the board can be vastly improved.
Ooh, that's exciting. My stepson would be loving that. He has bleach oozing from his pores. He's a little over the top in all that he does, and goes through, a can of wipes a week. it's a little crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I think before the pandemic, I used to think those people were over the top, but the world's different now, right? So
that's just it. Exactly. It makes him feel better, feel safer. I'm like, have at it.
Yeah.
There you go. Now let's get focused back here on the idea of a startup. So, you gals were in school and decided to move the idea forward. Now that you've been in it for, I guess, over 5 years, tell our audience what you wish you would have known before you went in and started this.
Oh man, can I say everything? I think, I came into this really with very little work experience, with very little life experience. I had just gone to college and that's it. That was my world. And I think the advice I would give to myself is, I would say, I guess there are many parts to it. The first piece of advice I would give to myself is to have confidence in my ability to learn things that I'm passionate about. And that's what I would tell anyone who's listening, who's interested in a hard technical problem and wants to solve it. Often we think that we can't do anything until we get a degree, or we learn this or we learn that. I know that's what I thought. I didn't think I could develop a product like this unless I was a chemistry major or I got my PhD in, organic chemistry. But I really think it's important not to underestimate how much you can learn on your own if you just care a lot about something. And I think, if you look at Kinnos, that's pretty much what this company is. It's primarily just a labor of love from me and my 2 other co-founders. And, I'm really proud of how far it's come to this day, but everything from product development to manufacturing to managing a team, all of these things I kind of had to learn on the fly. So being confident in the sense that you're going to face extremely difficult problems you're not going to know how to solve immediately, but believing in yourself that with hard work and tenacity, you can bring yourself to a level that you previously never could have imagined. My second piece of advice, especially would be specifically to all the women and all the minorities and people of color who are looking to get involved in this space. I would say it's really important to build a company with allies and with people that really believe in you and understand the difficulties of being a minority in this space. I definitely would not, if I was advising my younger self, I probably would not sugarcoat all the trials and tribulations that I would face in the future. And I think one of the most frustrating aspects of my job is people doubting my capability to do it by their assumptions of me when they see me, or if they see my name, or if they see how I look. And I think that happens to a lot of people in this space. So everything from, like an investor hitting on me, thinking that I wasn't going to be the person presenting, or having, men ask me literally who invented this technology after I've told them they're the CTO. And then when I tell them me, having them go, no way. And I think, all those incidences really build up if you are a minority in this space, and it can feel, it can really wear you down over time, because it's frustrating to feel like you need to constantly prove yourself over and over again. So I think, having the idea that, when you're building a company, you're also building your own community, build a company that values diversity the same way you do, build a company that has the same values as you do. And even though you'll still encounter those frustrations out in the, what I like to call real world, at least in the company that you're building, you can make sure that the value structure is aligned with you. And then I think my third piece of advice is probably a practical piece of advice. But if you are ever starting a technical company and your patent IP is very important to the functioning of your company, do not skimp on the lawyer fees. Pay the money, even if it hurts. Otherwise, you're going to be paying a lot more later to fix the mistakes you made when you're trying to save money in the beginning.
That's some advice we have not yet had on this show. And we've had over 75 episodes, Katherine. So I really appreciate that. And I also wanted to come back around to your point about not sugarcoating things. But where I was going to go is that there's a whole additional targeting level now that's just appalling, this whole Asian hate movement. And it's got to be tremendously challenging to try to battle with that too. Like, it's a lot to take on. You're expected as the founder, co-founder, to just be all that in a bag of potato chips every day, show up. Yep. Great. We're on it. And meanwhile, you go home and just go, oh my God, survived another day. Like, thank goodness. Right. It's horrific.
Yeah, definitely. I think what I always am surprised about is how different I look to other people. And I often forget about it in the moment. I feel like everybody else, but then a comment will be made that clearly shows me that when this person sees me in this room, they clearly have identified me as different. And I think, my two co-founders are also Asian. And, during our experience, we've had a lot of experience walking to the room and being the only people of color in the room, being the only Asians in the room, and everyone's looking at you. And there's a certain way that I want to convey myself so that I'm representing Asian Americans well. But at the same time, there's always a point of frustration where I feel like, I'm not being adequately represented here. Why do I feel like, I have to then bear, the burden of representing all Asians? They should have more people of color in this room. But I think, it all just goes to say it's hard to be the minority in any space. And, not only was I Asian American and a female, I also was really young. So whenever I walked into a space with a lot of people that were older than me, automatically people don't take you as seriously. And so I think, working on this company, living in New York, all this has given me a lot of thick skin. I think I'm not used to thick skin in the sense that these incidents don't usually bother me as much. But, with all this recent increase in violence against Asian Americans, that's really been personally shocking. And, when I'm walking around the city with my friends now, there are so many points where maybe I used to feel safe, but now I'm like, okay, make sure let's walk in a group, or make sure let's head home early so that I don't feel exposed to, any kind of violent hatred. But, would just like to say that I think to improve, the situation, we can only elevate, Asian voices, or elevate, this experience. So by increasing the amount of awareness, once you know something, you care about something. And I think that's, the real best way to improve, what the world is like. So I'm really glad that we're talking about this on this podcast.
And I'm sorry that you are subjected to this and that you feel fear when you walk around. Like, I'm proud of you when you say, like, yeah, you're a New Yorker, right? If you can make it there, hell, you can make it anywhere, right? Damn straight. But it's also where you have to go through that. And what I say to folks that are out there in the audience that want to be white allies, or even allies of color, supporting other groups within color, there are things that you have to do. I think we've moved beyond the education and we're in the do mode. If you really want to be supportive. And one of the things that I did last March, I published one of the first books on COVID. It was the battle for humanity and what was going to happen next. And I forecast all these things, including Asian hate and backlash and all this sort of stuff. And I made the protagonist in my story a male Chinese scientist. And he's the hero, because I anticipated that there was going to be a little bit of negative heat.
Yeah. It's scary to not trust the community around you. I think that confidence I had walking around before, feeling like this is my city. And then with the rise of attacks and stuff, I look around, and now when I'm walking around, I wonder, like, is this my city? Like, do people want me here? And I think that kind of feeling of alienation is really unfortunate and really isn't fair, especially to all these Asian Americans. I see myself as American first and foremost. I was born here. I was raised here. There is no other home that I have. And so, to be clearly labeled as different all the time, it's very unsettling, because again, I don't feel different. I feel the same on the inside. And it isn't until someone points out that I'm Asian or makes a comment that am I aware that people see me so differently.
Yeah. See, I saw you as a New Yorker. Like, yeah, we're all part of the greater New York area. Like, there we go, right?
Exactly.
All right.
We've all been beaten down by the cities.
And I think people have become unhinged by COVID, and that's a whole separate conversation. But
yeah.
I really, that's just had a tremendous impact on so many aspects of our lives. I don't know.
Yeah, I can't even begin to start unpacking, what has happened to the, the whole world's mentality, right? I can't even imagine.
It is shifted. And speaking of the past and what's happened, that's our next question, Katherine. I'm giving you some pixie dust, and I'm saying you get to sprinkle pixie dust on one thing from your past, and you get to change it. What do you change?
I think what I would change is the amount of time I've spent worrying about hurt feelings of people that I work with. I think that as a woman, I often already kind of overcompensate emotionally, and I worry about, am I being nice enough? But I think what I've learned from, my work experience has been that I need to take myself seriously, and that instead of worrying about whether or not people like me, at the end of the day, it's more important that this company succeeds and we all move forward together. And so if I could sprinkle just a little bit of pixie dust on where I was last year, which was, very stressed out and very miserable, and definitely over emotionally burdened with what I thought I needed to do as a co-founder. And maybe that points to just a larger conversation in general, to co-founder or, startup burnout. I think that startups in media are often displayed as this, ideal, amazing job where you're working on your own thing, you're passionate about it, you're, grinding 24/7. You read stories about people who live in the office, and it contributes to this kind of founder myth that you have to do certain things or do things in a certain way in order to be a successful founder. And it leads to a lot of imposter syndrome. It leads to a lot of stress and comparison. And I think the more I've learned, and the older I've gotten, the more I've matured, comparison is the thief of all joy. and all paths are different. And while I can learn from other stories and glean, best practices and what not to do, I think being able to solidify myself in the idea that this is, what I'm working on, it's individual to me. It's going to get done on its own timeline. And as much as I compare to other people, that will not change the end product of what I'm working on. And so just in general, I think subscribing a little bit less to what people think about you or how you are interpreted, and caring more about whether or not you are living in line with your own values.
How long did it take you to get to that place where, hey, look, I'm driving the bus. Either you're on the bus or get off the bus. How long did it take you to get there?
Oh man. I would say that I've probably been working on this like consciously for 2-3 years, but like subconsciously my whole life, most likely. It's definitely doesn't just end here. I read the book Radical Candor last year, and that was a massive help. And that kind of got me really inspired to start communicating a lot more directly and to be a lot more confident in what I know and what I say. And, I keep going back to this woman point. And it's not that, I think it's so unique that I'm a woman as a co-founder, but what I just found is that, women, especially in a technical space, doubt themselves a lot more. And I wasted so much time doubting myself when I could have just spent that time believing myself and getting work done. I think I didn't realize the emotional burden, the emotional work of constantly thinking that I was stupid or constantly thinking that I was dumb and not doing a good job. And just being able to, learn how to switch off those voices and switch on more productive voices. Like, you can work hard and you can learn it. Like, you made a mistake, no big deal. You'll fix it. I think that has already drastically improved, my outlook, and drastically improved the rate at which I get burnout. And so, I really would just say to, anyone out there in general who can be really hard on themselves or is their own worst critic, I just think there's immense value in being your own biggest fan, and you'll find a lot more efficiencies and you'll be a lot more productive and also a lot happier if you're not always being, the one that's tearing yourself down.
Ooh, I love that. It's the cure for emotional exhaustion. Thank you, Katherine. All right, we're just about out of time here, so we're going to wrap up. Couple of quick questions. How can our audience help you?
So if anyone out there listening and knows anyone that works in healthcare, please share the Kinnos Highlight system with them. We are interested in just educating the general public in how to improve disinfection.
Got it. We'll be sure to let folks know. And last question. Now, if I got to take a peek into your closet and you pulled out one pair of shoes that said, yep, this pair of shoes, boots, stilettos, sneakers, flats, or flip-flops best represents my personality, what are we looking at?
Ooh, I would say that I am Faye US. It's a cheap $25 shoe you can get on pretty much any retail site like Amazon. It used to be used for Chinese wushu, but suddenly has seen a resurgence in Brooklyn as a fun, hip shoe. I like it because I get a lot of blue on my shoes and it's really easy to wash off. And I also like them because, just, having that little Asian representation always makes me feel a little bit happier.
Oh, we like that. That's it. Good on you, right? Okay. So Katherine Jin of Kinnos, thank you so very much for stopping by our Grit Daily Like a Boss podcast today. And we want to make sure everybody checks out Kinnos if you want to figure out how to be able to disinfect more safely and more effectively by being color-coded and guided to be able to do that. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the Grit Daily podcast and the newsletter. Thank you, Katherine.
Thank you so much, Loralyn, for having me.
And how about that fantastic intro by Touch Circle?